as we jump back into the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is actually a collection of sermons, different topics that Jesus talked about. And they were probably given in their most succinct form because they didn't just write. It took a lot of effort to write things down back then. But the very essence of what Jesus taught and is given to us in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. And last spring we started tackling some of those topics that Jesus spoke on. And now we're going to continue on as we get through the rest of September and into October, finishing up some of the topics that he's given to us on there. And most of these topics are kind of dealing with things in everyday life and the way that we practice our religion, but Jesus specifically takes note of two things. He says, whatever you're doing, what is your motivation? Let's check our motivation. We can do all the right things, but if our motivation is wrong, then we need to take a look at that. And Jesus is saying part of being in the kingdom of God is, let's look at our hearts. And so each of these little mini sermons teaches us to look at our hearts and what are our motivations. But also he says, I don't want you to be hypocrites about things. It's very easy to do the right things for God, but be doing it in a hypocritical way. And so he's saying, I want you to really take a look at things and to make sure that your life and your heart and your actions are really all lining up together. And so those are the things we're looking at here. And today we're talking about what Jesus says about how do we give to the poor. How do we give in general is what we're going to look at today, to be givers. And so he says there's two things that are wrong when you give. One is that maybe you give and you want a lot of attention given among yourself because you have been so generous. And so he says we don't want to do that, but what we want to do is to be givers. When we give to the poor, when we give to those in need, that we do it as unto the Lord. And that's what he's teaching us here today. The passage we're looking at is in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus says, beware practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. So when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and our Father who sees in secret will reward you. It was very common in that time for the richer people to go along, and when they saw the beggars along the road, they would make a big to-do of it and say, I'm going to give to the poor. And so they would hand it out and they would exclaim it to everybody and make a big deal about it, so that they drew attention upon themselves, even to where they might blow a trumpet and say, okay, it's time to give. And we read in another place that the same thing happened when people came to church and to give their offerings to the Lord, that they would make a big to-do about it and let everybody see what they were giving and how they were giving. And I don't think that's so much a big problem for us today. We definitely don't, we don't sound the trumpets when we're giving to the poor or giving our offerings, do we? We don't do that. But is there a place in our heart that's kind of doing that? We start blowing the trumpets for ourselves. Oh, I'm so good. Look how much I gave. Look how I gave to this poor person. Look how I donated. Look how I helped provide. Sometimes we blow the trumpets in our own hearts, but God sees our hearts. So whether we do it in public, whether we do it in our hearts, that's not the way we give. Jesus says if you've given that way, that you've blown the trumpets, then you've received your reward. The reward in heaven is nullified because you didn't do it out of love. You didn't do it as unto the Lord because you did it for the trumpet sound in their own heart. So he's very, very clear about that is what is God looks upon in disgust. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about spiritual gifts, talking about how God's given us all the abilities to be able to serve and to speak and to be able to come alongside and make God's kingdom come together and work. And in the middle of that passage in 1 Corinthians, he goes into what we call the love chapter and says everything you do should be because of love. When you're serving God, you're not doing it because you have a duty or because somebody just has to get it done. And so I step in and do it out of love, because that's the greatest thing of all. And in the same way, we're told here in 1 Corinthians 13, we'll read it here, it says, if I speak in tongues of men and angels, but I don't have love, then I'm just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Even if I have prophetic powers and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith enough to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And this part here, if I give away all I have, and even if I deliver up my body to be burned, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. If we give and we're generous and we help the poor and needy around us, but we don't have love, then God says it's not worth anything at all. The greater good is not the giving, but the heart behind the giving. And so today I ask us, let's examine our hearts as we give, as we help others in need, as we make our shoe boxes, as we help serve those around us. What's our motivation? Can it truly come from a heart of love to God and love to our fellow man? Being generous is good, but being loving is better. And letting love be the source of checking our motivations. Jesus says there's always going to be poor people around us. And we could get into the debate about poor people and how to help them effectively. And of course, we have government systems and we have all kinds of things in place that try to do all the things that need to be done. But Jesus says, he reminds us, he says, you're always going to have the poor with you. You know, it's always going to be, we're never going to wipe out poverty. We're never going to be able to not have this be a problem. So it's something that we're always going to have to deal with. How do we deal with the poor? And Jesus goes on to say in Matthew 25, he says, the way you treat the poor and the needy is going to be a reflection of where your heart really is. Because Jesus says, I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And the people are saying, well, we didn't do this for you, Jesus. You didn't have these problems. But he goes on to say, he answers them, and he says, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me. When we do it for our brothers and sisters who live on this planet, then we've done it to the Lord. And when we help someone who's needy, we shouldn't look at them as just being a needy person or a poor person, but look upon them as the face of Christ. I'm doing this as if it was Christ in that place. And if we look at people in that way, that are needy and they're poor, then it gives us the ability, we're not just helping a poor person, but we're helping Christ, because he's told us this is very important to him, that we are reaching out and doing these things and helping those that don't have all the privileges that we have. And so it helps us to be able to look at people not just as people and to feel sorry for them, but to say, I'm doing this for Jesus, as unto the Lord himself. And that helps us to be able to have that kind of love towards others that might be harder to find in our own hearts, but do it as unto the Lord in our love for him. I know a lot of times we see needy people and it's easy to look at them and have feelings of judgment or feelings of disgust or feelings of pity. I mean, we have those things that naturally arise in us when we see the poor around us. And you know what? It's very easy to look at poor people and say, well, maybe they're just being lazy. You know, maybe they just have a sense of entitlement. You know, they should have planned ahead. You know, we come up with all these things in our minds. And sometimes the sins of the poor are those very things. Laziness can cause poverty. Not planning and thinking ahead can cause poverty. Feeling entitled and mooching off the systems, those are things that are because of sin. And before a person before God, they have to answer for that. The poor have to answer for those things. But the rich, we have to answer ourselves for our heart. Do we feel like we're self-sufficient? I've worked hard, I've deserved it. I can handle it myself. I can be able to spend upon myself and indulge, because that's what we do, chasing our American dreams. We're responsible, the rich themselves, for our own sins of spending upon ourselves and not being generous. with the things that God wants us to be generous with. And so when it comes down to being rich or poor, and you may say, well, I'm not rich or poor, I'm just kind of in the middle and I'm just getting by and whatever. No matter where we're at, it's not about where we're at on the economic scale. It's about our hearts right before God. Have we taken a look in the mirror and seen our own sin, whatever it is, the sins of the poor or the sins of the rich, or maybe the sins of the middle who can be indifferent to both? Whatever our sin is, we need to take a look at that first and make sure our heart is in the right place so that we can be givers, that we can be generous, that we can look around us and see who has the needs and how can I be led by God to help provide for those things. And so that's what we need to look at is the motivation. We see ourselves created in God's image, and we see other people created in God's image as well. And we reach out to them as unto Christ. When this summer I went with the teenagers down to Nashville, and I and other adults are going as chaperones, but we jump right in there and we work right with the kids. Whatever they're doing, we're sweating, we're doing everything as it was. And I can tell you a little story here that the first day, I was going to be assigned to a group that was going to go to a homeless shelter. And I thought, that's pretty cutting edge. I don't really see homeless people around me in my day-to-day life, and that would be really interesting to go and just kind of be a part of that and help feed them and talk to them or whatever I needed to do. And so I was pretty excited about doing that. But right when we were getting ready to leave, we found out that it was only going to be women that were there. And so they needed to have females go to be kind of in front and make sure that everything was okay. And so I had to trade out with another leader. And Allison got to go down there. Well, she was assigned to go to the food pantry. And I was disappointed. I thought, food pantry, that's not very exciting. We got a food pantry here in Arcola. I mean, it's not even, okay, I'll go to the food pantry. And I put on my good attitude and went with the group that I wasn't supposed to go with. But we traded, and I went there. And when we got there, I still had a little bit of a bad attitude inside. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing all day. I'm going to be unloading trucks and bringing the food inside and going through it all. So that's what I was doing that day. And as I was doing it, I tried to have a good attitude. And at one point I had a break, and I texted my mom, because my mom's really involved in the food pantry in Arcola. And she's asked me about getting involved before. She's not even here today. She's on a trip today. And I said, no, that's not for me. I got other things that are more important to do. But I texted her and I said, Mom, guess what I'm doing today? I'm working in a food pantry. And she wrote back, just as moms can do, she says, oh, that's really great. Maybe you can help out here in Arcola too. She used that as a way to sneak it in. And I wrote back and I was like, yeah. I just kind of blew her off about it. As we finished up the day, some of the people who were local there that worked at the food pantry sat down with us and talked about the kind of people who came to the food pantry. The lady talked about how most of the people who came there were refugees, people who had just entered into our country. And she said, everybody thinks that the government gives them lots of handouts. She says they don't. The government will get them started for the first month or so, and after that, they're on their own. Whether they know the language, whether they have connections, whatever. And these people are all of a sudden thrown into a new land, and they've got to make do. And it's hard to find jobs. And they may have had great potential for jobs where they were at, but because of the situation, they weren't able to work. But here, they have to kind of take a step back. And they have to go clean or help out in some menial task, even though maybe they're very well educated. And so they were talking about that. The lady was talking about how there was a woman that came there that used to be caught in sex trafficking, and she's free from that now, and she's starting her life over. And they come to the food pantry and they get the help. And as I was listening to that, I thought, yeah, these people really deserve it. So I felt really good about what I was doing there, because I thought, these refugees, somebody caught in human trafficking, I think there's room in my heart for compassion for those people. And so that was kind of I kind of felt better about my day and convinced that it was a good thing to do. But then I kept thinking about my mom's text, well, you can help in Arcola too. And I was thinking, well, but in Arcola, we don't have really refugees, and we don't have people that are caught or rescued out of human trafficking. And these are just normal people that, for some reason or other, they need to go to the food pantry. And I was kind of judgmental in my heart about it. And I just kept feeling the conviction of God that I'm judging people. And so when I came back, God had worked to me, and I said, I'm going to go over there and volunteer at the food pantry. I hadn't done it before, but I went to do it. And since I've come back, every week I go for a couple hours and help. Just take out the boxes of groceries to the people's car. And as I'm there, I'm trying to practice this very thing. When I see people, instead of thinking, why are they here? Why aren't they out working? I don't even know them or their circumstances, but I know I'm very judgmental inside. And some of you are smiling in a way that you probably would be doing the same thing, okay? It's very easy to be judgmental. But to be able to look upon them and think, I want to see the face of Christ in these people. And to be able to serve them in a way that's meaningful as unto the Lord. And I'm practicing this. I'm trying to learn it. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not saying I've arrived, but I'm in the process of trying to learn what it is to be able to serve people, to serve the needy as unto the Lord. And whatever our opportunities are, whether it's a food pantry or something else, let's let that be our common prayer and our desire, that we would be a church of people who look upon the poor with the face of Christ, that look upon them not with judgment and trying to figure out what their problem is and what their sin is that might have contributed to them being here today. Because when I'm doing that, my own sin of judgment and pride stares at me right back in the face. And so we're all guilty. And if we all come to the same level and realize, hey, we're humans created in the image of God, we all have needs. Somebody's need might be to be served. Somebody's need might be to serve and to learn how to do that. Let's learn how to do it. If you want to get involved with food pantry, they need some people to help out there. Whether it's sorting food, getting it into packages, whether it's helping the people get the stuff and out to their car, there are ways to be able to do that even right in our own community. And it's a great way to get involved. Can we learn just to be generous? Just to be generous, period. As the Spirit moves in us to be able to share, to be able to give, to be able to help out somebody else that's in need. When God nudges us to have an open heart, that we just immediately do what's needed to be able to give and to serve someone else as unto the Lord. We need to be smart about it. We don't want to give money to an alcoholic or somebody that's going to go buy drugs. We don't want to do that. We do value hard work and responsibility. We need to help people get jobs and things that they can do and provide for themselves and their families. We need to use discernment on what to give and how to give and who to give, and trust God's leading on that. Those things are not nullified by all of this. But as we use our head and our heart and our eyes to be able to see people the way that God sees them, I think that's something that we can all grow in a very special way. In 2 Corinthians 9, the Apostle Paul reminds us, whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. As we give to those around us, as we give to the Lord and his work there, the church is poor unless we give the offerings, right? We don't have a way as a church to earn money for ourselves, so we give. You can see the church itself in our offerings is giving to the poor. As we give generously, then we receive in return. What do we receive in return? Some people say, if you give $10, God will give you back 100. That is not said this here anywhere in the Bible. But there's going to be a harvest. When we give, things grow. Things grow around us. People's lives are changed. People are fed. People are clothed. People have what is needed, and growth takes place. And growth can take place in our own hearts as well, as my own story tells. And so we reap bountifully in the harvest. And so we want to be generous as God enables us to be able to give. The next 2 Sundays, also, we're going to be talking about these Sermon on the Mount things that Jesus talks about when he's saying, how do we trust God to provide for ourselves? We're talking about providing for others. Sometimes we're just holding on from paycheck to paycheck to be able to receive what our needs have been met. Sometimes we don't trust God enough, and we're going to look at those in the next couple of weeks of where do our possessions and our things that we own and the money that we have and don't have, how do those things play in our lives? Very practical things, because we all have checkbooks, we all have bank accounts, we all have to go to the store, we have to buy, we sell. were involved in this. So the next couple Sundays, we have the opportunity to look in deeper about our relationship between money and ourselves and our faith in God. So I hope you continue to stick with us as we see what Jesus has to teach us about these things. What are our motivations for giving? And are we giving as unto the Lord? Let's let generosity come from our heart. Jesus himself was very generous when he gave up his whole self, his body, his blood that was given to us. And as we share in this communion service today, we have the opportunity to be able to even understand deeply how much the Lord loves us, and his generosity for us enables us to be generous with others. As we begin, let's